The rain had been falling since sunset, heavy and relentless, drumming against the cracked roof like it had something to prove. In a quiet neighborhood on the outskirts of Ohio, where streetlights flickered more than they shined, Daniel Carter sat on the edge of his worn-out couch, staring at the floor. Life hadn't been kind to him lately. Correction, it hadn't been kind for years. At 36, Daniel was a single father doing everything he could to survive. His wife had passed away 3 years earlier, leaving behind memories, unpaid bills, and their 7-year-old son, Noah. Since then, Daniel's world had shrunk to 2 things: work and his child. That night, Noah was asleep on the couch beside him, clutching a faded superhero toy missing one arm. Daniel pulled a thin blanket over his son and sighed quietly. Tomorrow was another early shift at the warehouse. Another day of lifting boxes that weighed less than his worries. Then came the knock. It was soft at first, almost hesitant, like whoever stood outside wasn't sure they belonged there. Daniel froze. No one ever knocked this late. Not friends. Not family. Not even trouble. The knock came again, louder this time. Daniel stood slowly and walked to the door, peering through the small, scratched window. A woman stood outside in the pouring rain, her hair soaked, her hands trembling as she hugged herself for warmth. He hesitated. Opening that door meant responsibility. Risk. Questions he didn't have answers to. But then she looked up, and their eyes met. Fear, exhaustion, desperation. Daniel opened the door. "Please," she said before he could speak, her voice cracking. "My car broke down miles away. My phone died, and I just need somewhere safe for the night." Daniel glanced back at Noah, then back at her. He had little to offer, barely enough for himself, but he knew what it felt like to need help and have no one. "You can come in," he said quietly. "It's not much, but it's dry." Relief washed over her face as she stepped inside. "Thank you," she whispered. "I won't forget this." The house smelled faintly of old wood and instant noodles. Daniel handed her a towel and one of his hoodies, too big for her, but warm. She sat near the heater, her hands shaking as they slowly thawed. "I'm Daniel," he said. "Claire," she replied, forcing a small smile. They didn't talk much that night. Some people carry stories too heavy to unload on strangers. Daniel understood that. He spread a blanket for her on the couch and went to sleep on the floor beside his son. For the first time in a long while, the house didn't feel empty. Morning arrived quietly. Sunlight slipped through the torn curtains, painting the room in soft gold. Daniel woke to the sound of laughter, something he hadn't heard in his home for a long time. Claire was sitting on the floor with Noah, drawing superheroes on scrap paper. Noah was animated, smiling wide, explaining every detail like it was the most important thing in the world. Daniel stood frozen in the doorway. He couldn't remember the last time someone brought that kind of light into their lives. Over breakfast, toast shared between 3 people and coffee stretched thinner than it should be, Claire thanked him again. "You didn't even ask who I was," she said softly. Daniel shrugged. Didn't seem important. She studied him for a moment, like no one had ever spoken to her that way before. Before leaving, Claire hugged Noah tightly. "You're very brave," she told him. Noah smiled. "You can come back anytime." Her eyes shimmered as she nodded. "Maybe I will." A black SUV pulled up moments later, the kind Daniel only saw on television. As Claire stepped inside, she looked back at the small house one last time. That evening, Daniel found an envelope on the kitchen table. Inside was a note. "Thank you for reminding me what kindness looks like when no one is watching." There was also a business card. Claire Reynolds. Daniel's breath caught. Reynolds Industries, one of the largest corporations in the country. The woman he'd offered his last cup of coffee to was a daughter of a billionaire. Weeks passed. Life went back to normal, or at least Daniel's version of normal. Then one afternoon, the black SUV returned. Claire stepped out alone, holding groceries and wearing a nervous smile. "I hope this isn't strange," she said. "I just couldn't stop thinking about you and Noah." She began visiting often, sometimes bringing food, sometimes just listening. She never acted rich, never talked down. She sat on the floor, laughed with Noah, and helped Daniel fix things around the house. Slowly, walls came down. Daniel spoke about his wife, about the nights he felt like he was failing his son. Claire spoke about growing up surrounded by people but never feeling seen. Two worlds collided, not through money or power, but through understanding. Months later, during another quiet evening, Claire stood by the door. "You saved me that night," she said. Daniel shook his head. "I just opened the door." She smiled. "Sometimes, that's everything." As she walked away, Daniel realized something had changed, not just in his life, but in himself. He believed again, not in miracles, but in kindness. Thank you for watching Classic Stories. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more stories that remind us how powerful compassion truly is.